first January 6th committee hearing wrapping up tonight in D.C. The panel has been investigating that attack for nearly a year with nearly 1,000 interviews under their belts. Some of those interviews and surveillance video from the Capitol shown for the first time tonight. And the chairman calling the insurrection an attempted coup, putting democracy at risk. And we've got team coverage for you tonight. And we start with WGN's Jenna Barnes.
Yeah, guys, tonight really served as the opening arguments for this committee. This was the first of a series of public hearings this month on the Capitol attack. And tonight, they really put former President Donald Trump as the central figure in what unfolded.
This is now effectively a riot.
With a video timeline of the events of January 6th and video interviews with close allies of former President Donald Trump, the House committee investigating the attack on the Capitol began to lay out their findings of a year-long investigation.
And ultimately, Donald Trump, the President of the United States, spurred a mob of domestic enemies of the Constitution to march down the Capitol and subvert American democracy. January 6th was the culmination of an attempted coup.
An interview with Trump's Attorney General Bill Barr shows he saw no evidence of election fraud that would have undermined the 2020 election.
I made it clear I did not agree with the idea of saying the election was stolen and putting out this stuff, which I told the president was.
And Ivanka Trump accepted the election was legitimate.
I respect Attorney General Barr, so I accepted what he was saying.
But in public, the president continued to push the election lie. In private, in late December 2020, the committee says he met with a team of lawyers, including Rudy Giuliani, discussing extreme ways to overturn the results, including having the military seize voting machines.
A little more than an hour after Ms. Powell, Mr. Giuliani, General Flynn, and the others finally left the White House, President Trump sent the tweet on the screen now, telling people to come to Washington on January 6th. Be there, he instructed them. Will be wild.
The president placing public pressure on Vice President Mike Pence to change the outcome of the election, even as the rioters threatened his life.
And aware of the rioters' chance to hang Mike Pence, the president responded with this sentiment, quote, "Maybe our supporters have the right idea. Mike Pence, quote, deserves it."
Representative Cheney says the president oversaw a sophisticated 7-part plan to overturn the election. She says the president placed no call to any element of the U.S. government on January 6th to defend the Capitol, but Vice President Mike Pence did.
All right, Jenna, thank you. We've got a lot of insight we want to get to. Paul Lisnek has been with us all evening watching the House Select Committee. And Paul, they went fairly deep into showing how long the pre-planning for this attempt to overturn the election actually went.
And Ray and Micah, that was their mission tonight. They have a different mission for each of the hearings that there's going to be. That was tonight's mission. And I think what's important, we don't want to forget it happened early on in the evening, was making it clear from Attorney General Bill Barr, former Attorney General, that there was no voter fraud and that there was no rigging of the election. And I say that that's important because this isn't just a Democratic congressperson or something like that who's making that point. This is the president's own attorney general. And if anybody carried water for President Trump throughout the course of the term, it was Bill Barr. So when Bill Barr turned on him and then forced essentially to resign from his office, that means a lot. Again, people can look down on Bill Barr, or you can look at Bill Barr and say he speaks the truth that he knows.
Let's talk a little bit about the testimony tonight. Two witnesses who were there that day spoke. Nick Quistad, who was a filmmaker embedded with the Proud Boys and also with the Oath Keepers. He took video of them. Let's listen to what he had to say.
I remember we walked down the mall, we walked to the right of the reflecting pool, and then north along the road that leads to the Peace Circle. And as we were walking past the Peace Circle, I framed the Proud Boys to the right of my shot with the Capitol behind, and we see one sole police officer at the barriers, which are subsequently breached.
He talks about how things started turning darker than he thought, noticing 250 to 300 Proud Boys marching toward the ellipse. Quite surprising. The first time we've heard anything like this.
Yeah, and interesting on top of that was a point that Chairman Thompson made, which was to say that movement that he was talking about actually happened before the president ever even spoke. So the notion that I just did what President Trump told me to do, you have to raise a question about that, because apparently, and according to our filmmaker, these folks were making their way down there and the president hadn't even taken the podium.
Capitol Police Officer Caroline Edwards described being called a traitor by the rioters and insurrectionists as she was holding back the barricade, ultimately suffering injuries. Let's listen to a bit of her testimony.
We started grappling over the bike racks. I felt the bike rack come on top of my head, and I was pushed backwards, and my foot caught the stair behind me, and my chin hit the handrail, and then at that point I had blacked out, but the back of my head clipped the concrete stairs behind me.
And she comes from a line of law enforcement family, and she did, I think, a really admirable job of describing how she still felt that her mission there was to protect democracy in action.
Briefly, I just think the Capitol Police have the most powerful testimony for folks who say this didn't happen, there was nothing to it. You hear their testimony, and I do recall last time around there was a conservative host who made the point that they deserve literally Academy Awards for their performances and their testimony. Again, reality is reality. We saw the footage. She said what happened to her, and then they showed the footage of what happened to her and the damages and injuries she sustained.
Congressman Mike Quigley was not at the Capitol tonight, but he is in his office here in Illinois, and he watched the hearings. Congressman, was it what you expected it to be?
Well, WGN knows all too well. I was live on your station while this was happening on January 6th. I have to tell you, I hadn't seen that footage before, as well as anybody else, and that was powerful. It's tough. You have to appreciate it's a little bit different for me because I'm not sure I'd be here without them, without those officers' sacrifice, and you see the deadly consequences of it and the violent consequences of it. So it's very powerful. You think you're okay with all this, and you're going to be all right, and then you watch this new footage and you see the pain that was inflicted, and it gets to you.
Congressman, as you live through that and you rewatch that video, but in a new context now, what do you hope the American people, many of whom have long ago made up their minds about where they fall on this, what do you hope they come away with hearing and learning about this testimony?
Look, this was an attempted coup. We came very close to having a successful coup, and even more horrific circumstances. If it weren't for some degree of luck, but certainly the bravery of the police officers and some, including the vice president, this would have had a much worse outcome. So I'm hoping the American people watches all of this, pays attention to this, appreciates this isn't over. There are people who are still espousing the big lie, who are running and getting elected to office, whose plan is to change the course of history and how we do elections in the future. So I'm hoping they pay attention. I hope they understand the circumstances. And the following, we've got to have some accountability for this. But most of all, we have to change the culture in this country.
Congressman, some people would say that the panel was talking to the choir essentially tonight, because certainly at least one conservative station didn't even carry this. How important is it that there be any kind of breakthrough to those people who stand behind President Trump, will continue to stand behind him? The attacks will begin, if they haven't already, against what we've seen tonight. How do they build their case? And secondly, was Liz Cheney really just speaking to the Department of Justice to try and get them to act, since they really can't do anything in terms of criminal charges?
Well, they can certainly pass on evidence, and dual investigations will help. And I will say to that conservative network, you were all singing a different song on January 6th and the days after. And so was Leader McCarthy, who talked about the president should resign and that he wouldn't take any more of this. And he thought the president was responsible. So, absolutely. I mean, they have to take a stand on this. This matters, and I do think that this is just the beginning. They talked of a consciousness. The president knew what he was saying was wrong. There's issues of inciting. There's issues of pressuring Trump, the federal judge who talked about the fact that the president might likely have violated 2 federal statutes in so doing. So, look, we didn't do a 9/11 commission to bolster anybody or change anyone's polling. It was to protect our country, to hold those accountable and make sure it didn't happen again. And much the same is true here. We have to make sure this doesn't happen again. We need to hold people accountable, and the American people need to know exactly what took place, who is responsible.
And Congressman, as you say, this is just the beginning of these hearings. During the hearing, were you getting texts from colleagues? What are people saying?
I think it was so riveting. It's probably something we're going to be talking about all the time from now on. Obviously, leading up to this, and we were in session this week. It was something the members were talking about, recognizing the fragility of our democracy. You look out from the steps of the Capitol, and you recognize that none of us are that completely safe, and that we are really reliant on our safety, democracy's safety, not just for the courage of these officers, but for the thinking of the American people and the trust they have in their government.
Congressman Quigley, thank you for speaking with us. As always, we appreciate your insight. And thanks to political analyst Paul Lisnick for your analysis during this hearing. WGN will continue to follow developments in the January 6th hearings. You can always read more at WGNTV.com and get breaking updates through our free WGN News app.